Hello again. I have a couple of new subscribers. Actually, I have quite a few new subscribers, and I'm pleased about that. There's one particular subscriber who had asked me to put up the stuff that I originally skipped. If you remember when I first started this whole project, I may have bit off a little more than I can chew, and just like a politician, I kind of backpedaled. I skipped. Remember, I put up the one psychology of competition. I put up the one cat and mouse introduction, and that was the Waitzikin versus Kedanoff game. And I realized that the interaction between the software and it was overwhelming. What I had done was I had promised you the entire academy. And when I reached this, now I want to interrupt myself for a second here. Please watch this in HD and follow my mouse here. As you can see on the right side of your screen, I'm pointing to Josh Waitzikin's Academy, and you have all these. If any of you watched my videos before, you know I went through all of these, and then I went to one of these videos, the Psychology of Competition, and the one that's red check marked up there, that's the one that I put up. And then I afterwards skipped this section and went to the annotated games. And I put the push and pull. I put the, no, I'm sorry, I did not put that one yet. I put Waitzikin versus Luna, and I think the Waitzikin versus Peter. Those are the two I put up on the annotated games so far. In any case, Kyle, I believe his name is, new subscriber of mine, was adamant in wanting the rest of this psychology of competition, and I had told him in a note, in a comment or a reply to his comment, that they were a little overwhelming, but he was persuasive in his begging, and I told him in a couple of days I'll start putting them up again. So this is what I'm going to do. You'll notice that during the video, what he does, what Josh Waitzikin does in the psychology of competition, is he'll sit there and he'll explain things. He'll go back and talk about moves he would have made and things like that, and then he'll say, "What would you do?" or something to that effect, and he'll pause the lesson, waiting for you to click continue. So it was difficult for me to answer every question that he paused it on. So what I've decided to do was, after I give you this introduction of me talking, I'm going to shut off the microphone and I'm going to let the whole thing play. And when it pauses, when Josh Waitzikin says, "What would you do?" or something to that effect, asking you a question, I'll let it stay paused for a few seconds. You could even follow the mouse while you're playing the video, and then I'll start it again. In other words, I'll give you time. I'll give you about 2 or 3 seconds, maybe 5 seconds at best, to decide to pause the video while you think about it. But I'm going to basically let it stay paused for only a couple of few seconds and then continue it without saying anything. So you're not going to hear my voice through the whole thing, except for right now, of course. So the first one was already up. That was the cat and mouse introduction, Waitzikin versus Kedanoff. And I think I'm going to go through these verbatim right down the line. I know that the annotated games I'm skipping around, but these I'm going to go through verbatim. I'm going to go right down the line. So I'm going to start these from now on, and it may take me a couple of weeks, maybe even over a month to finish them all, so that perhaps we can have a long, I started this whole Chess Academy in my YouTube, I think it was in February, and when I decided to start using the Chessmaster software. Also, you'll find, of course, I'll be putting more puzzles up, and I won't be using the Chessmaster software for that. You know, you see that on my YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure you've seen the chess puzzle folder playlist. Right now, I believe there are 4 chess puzzles in there. Those I'm going to start putting, perhaps I'm going to start putting more than one puzzle, but we'll see. So anyway, I've talked enough. I'm going to shut the microphone off. And because I started recording in a new way, I'm able to actually capture the audio directly electronically instead of miking the speaker, as I mentioned in an earlier video. So I'm going to shut the microphone off for my own voice and let the software talk for you. Alrighty, so here goes. I'm shutting the mic off now.
And after king e6, I played king f3 and he resigned. There's nothing he can do. My bishop is always very safe on f8 or e7. This next game was played in the winter of 1998 in the Marshall Chess Club in New York City. My opponent's name was Nenad Vulasevich, a Yugoslavian man who I've known for many, many years, who I have, in fact, played countless times. We're going to begin from this position here. Now, this isn't exactly where the theme that I want to discuss comes in, although materialism is an issue which relates to this position in the concrete chessic sense because I sacrifice a pawn on this move. But what I want you to notice throughout the game is how my level of play fluctuates. That's what's really interesting, and actually it's pretty funny in this game. There were moments in which I played very, very well, and then there were moments where I played so horribly I can't even believe it. The reason for this is that I started to think about the result at times. I started to think about winning, and I started thinking about what I was going to do after the game, and I started relaxing. So I would play at a very, very high level, sacrifice material, gradually mount the pressure, and then I'd make a blunder. And I'm sure you'll recognize this from many of your own games. I've seen all different chess players do this for so many years. The second they get very close to winning the game, they relax and it slips away. And then they have to recover and do it again. This is a typical chess struggle. So White's move in this position. Take a look. What would you do? This is actually a moment where some people would want to, again, like I did in the last game against Kaidanov, gradually improve with a move like rook a to e1. But here I played a very good move. I sacrificed a pawn to compromise his structure. Actually, it's very similar to how Kaidanov was down a pawn against me in the last game. He was down a pawn, but inevitably he was going to win it back. And in this game, I sacrificed a pawn. I knew I was going to win it back, and when I did, it would be a positional advantage for me. I played f5. He played bishop takes f5. G takes was also possible. Then I would play knight g3. Pressure the pawn, also coming up to h5, and my light-squared bishop would be very good. After I play knight takes f5, then my bishop will still be on the board pressuring his kingside. He wanted to make that trade. It's not allow me to get that aim on h7. So he played bishop takes f5, bishop takes f5, g takes f5. Now what? One instinct might be to play knight g3 very quickly to try to win that f5 pawn. But that's not necessary. He can then play f4, maybe later try to play knight e3. I don't need to do that. I'm not in such a rush to win the f5 pawn. I'm actually playing for positional advantage. The first thing I did was to stop it from advancing. Bishop g3. My bishop on h4 wasn't really doing anything. Now I'm attacking his d6 point, and my next move can be, while my knight on e2 defends the f4 square, to play knight f3 to h4 and take on f5 with a knight. I want to win back the pawn, but I'm not so nervous trying to win back material that I rush to it. I want to do it in the best way possible. After bishop g3, he played knight 7 to b6, at once defending his pawn and preparing knight c4 to e3. This is an important moment. White's move. What would you do? So in all the games which I discuss, I'll tell you what I'm planning, what my opponent was planning, what his idea was, what my idea was. And a lot of the time, it'll be based on the idea that we have to stop the opponent's plan, or that we should stop the opponent's plan. And that's a very good way of doing things in chess, sometimes. But other times, we can make the judgment that our opponent's plan won't really help him, that it might in fact hurt him. So here, I could play b3 if I wanted to, and stop his aggressive idea of knight c4. The downside to b3, though, is that he has the c3 square. And when my e2 knight moves, he can play knight c3 and then put the other knight to d5 and put his knights on these two interesting squares. But truth be told, it wasn't the fact that b3 was bad that led me to not play it. It was that I made the decision that knight c4 to e3 would cause him more problems than it would do him good. I continued with my plan, knight h4. He played knight c4, queen d3, and knight c to e3. I had made the judgment that once his knight ran forward into my position, it would be weak. I played rook f3. So I allowed his piece into its active square, and then I began to circle it. Now, of course, if it were to be my move and I would play rook takes e3, my position would be excellent. After knight takes, queen takes, I've given up a rook for two knights, so it's a small material advantage for me, but much more important than the material in my position is objectively winning. Usually in middle games, two pieces are better than a rook, even than a rook and pawn. But here, of course, you can see that after knight takes f5 and my knight's jumping into play like this, black is in huge trouble. You'll also notice that here his knight on e3 is somewhat trapped. He's run forward and he has nowhere to go, so I don't have to take it right away. I could also play bishop f2, try to win the piece straight away. He played queen e7, defending the knight. Now his idea is if I play bishop f2 to defend it again with rook a to e8. And now I made the judgment that his position would fall apart if I could take on f5 with my knight. So there are usually two ways of handling such positions. You can either attack this piece or you can remove the defender. Usually when you see an opponent having two knights connecting, like a knight on e3, a knight on d5, or sometimes it'll be a knight on c6, a knight on d4, black will have knights like that repeating themselves. Those knights can be challenged by attacking the knight that's furthest ahead, like I mentioned piling up on the e3 square. But here I used a different idea. If his knight on e3 moves, the f5 square will fall and his whole kingside will immediately crumble. So I simply offered it in exchange, knight f4. It's a very simple move. My idea is that if he plays knight takes f4, then after we make the trade, when he moves his knight back, after knight takes f5, attacking his queen, after his queen moves, white is winning. So after knight f4, my idea is to play knight takes d5, and then when he takes back, just to take on f5 and win the game pretty easily that way. He played queen e4. What do you think of the position now? You might have the sense that black's game is holding by a thread, and it is. Now, of course, his idea with queen e4 was to trade off queens. He's being pressured positionally, and so, like I've discussed in the past, when you have a spatial disadvantage, when you're being pressured, you want to trade off to relieve some of the strain on your game. But after queen e4, everything is hanging. Think tactically now. White to move. What would you play? My first move was knight takes d5. He played queen takes d3, which was his idea. He wanted to play the in-between move of queen trade. Now, I should mention, if he plays c takes d5, taking back the knight, then of course his knight on e3 simply hangs. If he plays knight takes d5, I'll play knight takes f5. Obviously he wants to trade off queens, queen takes d3, and after rook takes d3, I'm going to win his pawn on d6, so I'll be up a pawn, but even more importantly, his bishop on g7, my knight on f5 is tremendously powerful. He's all bound up. White is winning. So now my opponent played his idea. Queen takes d3, the in-between move. And now I'm going to give you a vision into a chess player's mind. I knew I was winning. We get a certain intuition in chess. I knew the tactics in this position would work out to my advantage. So first of all, his idea is obviously that after c takes d3, he would simply play knight takes d5, have messed up my pawn structure a little bit, and his material would be okay. But I saw that I had the in-between move, knight e7 check. His idea was king f7, c takes d3, knight c2. His whole point is that, of course, he can't take back the knight, or I'll take back his knight and I'll be up a piece. But after knight c2, he's attacking my rook. Now, the decisions I made so far in this game were at a very high level. f5 was a good positional pawn sacrifice. Bishop g3 was a nice quiet move. I forced him to go into a line to try to save things that objectively should reach a losing position. Now with white, I'm winning. I didn't see quite how I was winning, but my chess sense told me that my position was winning. And what did I do? I'll be honest with you. I started thinking about a party that I was going to go to with my girlfriend after the game. You see, this was towards the end of the tournament. As a chess player, you should never be thinking about the end of the game while you're playing the game, but truth be told, that's what I did here. And I hadn't thought that I'd be able to meet her, and so I was completely focused on playing the game. But then when the position was so winning so early, I started thinking about wrapping up the game and going and meeting her. And so then here we are. I'm in a chess position. Things are tremendously complicated everywhere, but I've solved much harder problems than the simple question here of how to get my rook out of the way and win the piece. How can white win? First of all, take yourself out of any discussion of the psychology of the game. It's your move, you're white. Think of it as if it's in a tactics book. What do you do? Let's play a few more moves, get you a little closer. His idea is, if I play rook c1 attacking the knight, he's going to play knight takes d4, attacking my rook. And then if my rook moves somewhere like f4 attacking his knight, he'll have knight e2 check, forking all my stuff up. I played rook af1. What was my idea? If he plays king takes e7, I would begin with simply knight f5 check, attacking his bishop. He would have to play king f7, defending it. Then I could attack his knight, rook c1. You see, it's trapped. His only move would be to play b3. Then I can take it. A takes b3. His only move out is knight b4. And then bishop takes d6, takes yet another pawn, forks his knight and his rook. If he tries the final desperation of knight a2, for example, to try to get the knight away with tempo, I can play rook a1. I win the piece and win the game. Pretty straightforward. So after rook af1, it's pretty obvious that he can't take the knight right away. He has to take back on d4. I saw this. Now look, I'm still up a piece. All I have to do is figure out how to get my rook and my knight out of attack. This is not very hard. From this position, see if you can try to figure it out. Now, of course, yes, I do have the option of simply playing knight takes f5, taking my rook, taking his knight back, and I have two pieces for a rook, an excellent position with white, which is pretty much winning, and that's actually what I ended up doing soon. But that wasn't the best way. Try to figure out the forced win. White to play. What would you do? Rook e3 defends the knight. I assumed you would see that. But did you see what he had in mind? Knight c2, attacking my rook again. So now you're seeing the gist of the calculation. If you haven't calculated it all out yet, try to do it from here. The point is I'm going to play rook e2 to attack his knight. He's going to play knight d4, back attacking my rook again. If I go to e1, he's going to play knight c2 again, try to attack the rook. That's what his idea is. So with that in mind, if you haven't seen it already, try to calculate it out. Do you see how to get away? Rook e3, knight c2. If my rook goes to f3, he succeeded in pushing me off the knight on e7. So I go to e2, attacking his knight again. It's a very simple equation. I want to be able to get my rook out of the way without giving them the time to take my knight. Knight d4, rook e1, knight c2. Any strong chess player would know that in this position, black's idea should not hold up. And if I had simply been playing this position, playing chess, not thinking about something so irrelevant to my playing a chess tournament as going to a party afterwards, I wouldn't have any problem figuring out the right way. Can you see it here? How can I get out of the knight? What happened to me in this position is I knew that knight h takes f5 was winning. I knew it was winning. But because I was already thinking about the result, I got taken out of the struggle and I didn't have the patience to sit down and quietly, deeply calculate and find the forced win. It's not a very hard variation, but my state of mind simply would not allow me to enter into the position deeply and find the way. So I made the decision to play knight takes f5. I knew this was winning. I sacrificed in exchange. It wasn't such a terrible decision objectively because I should still be able to win the game fairly easily. But it was completely unnecessary. And one rule when you're up material, when you're trying to win a position that you have a material advantage in, is that there's no reason to make things double-edged. In other words, if you're up a piece, you don't need to make some exchange so that suddenly you have two pieces and a lot of pawns for a rook, because even if that's still objectively as much of an advantage, it's a little more complicated. And you don't need to complicate things when you're winning. So here, if I could simply make the trade, knight for knight, then I'd be up a knight, and I'd be winning easily. After knight takes f5, although I only lose the actual value of a pawn after knight takes, rook takes, I've made things a little bit more complicated. Think about it. If this were a tactics book, and I asked you, white to play, keep your material advantage, what would you do? the variation would run rook c1, attacking the knight. Of course, if he takes my knight, I would take his. Knight e3 on his part would be a big mistake, because I can play rook fe1, attacking the knight, and then when it moves, I can really move my knight. His idea was obviously knight d4, getting the knight out of the way, and still attacking something because he wants to play knight e2 check, forking my king and my rook. Then if I play rook f to e1, defending the checking square and defending my knight, his idea was bishop h6, attacking my rook on c1. This much I saw. If you haven't solved the problem yet, white to move. What do you see now? My opponent, of course, is a very strong player, so he had a pretty complicated idea. The point being, if I play rook b1, for example, he'll play knight c2, attacking the new rook. And if I go to e2, he's going to go back to d4. There's nowhere I can go on the e-file with a rook that will not be able to be attacked by his knight. He's trying to hassle me away from any possibility of defending my knight. But the correct idea involves using the placement of his bishop. Try to find it. What would you do? Rook c to d1, and then after knight c2, white to move. Do you see it now? If I play rook e2, he does his old idea, knight d4 back and forth. This is where my blind spot was. And again, I tell you, I reached this position in calculation, and if I had been quiet, if I had a peace of mind, I would have had no problem immediately finding the forced win. But because of my muddied state, because I was thinking about the win, because I was impatient, because I was already in my mind envisioning going dancing, I had no way of quietly finding a little quirk in the position. Because of course I looked at knight h takes f5, with the idea of after knight takes e1, I can take his bishop, for example. But then after I take his bishop, he takes my knight on e7, I take his knight, and again I have a bishop and a knight for a rook and a pawn. I have an excellent position, and in fact, objectively, my position is much, much better. But still, I didn't want to allow this. I can do better. Having that in mind, white to play here. Do you see it? If I had had the patience, and I did look at knight h takes f5, and I saw that it wasn't quite up to satisfaction, I would have easily noticed the difference. Ah yes, the key move is knight e takes f5. A little bit of a counterintuitive decision because it's going back, a knight so well placed, retreating. But now the point is that everything is safe. If he defends his bishop, I can simply move my rook and I'm up a piece. And if he takes my rook, now the difference is after knight takes h6, he can't take my knight. And after king g7 attacking my knight, I can retreat with check. And after the king moves, I take, and now of course I have 3 pieces for a rook, completely winning, and he would have had to resign. That was the forced win. So now returning to the position in the game, all I would have had to do is find that variation. Rook c1, knight d4, rook e1, bishop h6, rook d1, knight c2, knight e to f5. But I missed that final move because I was distracted by thoughts of something other than the game. I was just taken out of the moment by thoughts of the result, and I made my life much more difficult. I played knight h takes f5, still winning, and in fact, in some ways a more enjoyable position to play for white, because aesthetically it's rather beautiful. I have 2 beautifully placed knights. I'm going after him. He takes on e1, I take back. I have 2 knights for a rook and a pawn, but I'm going to win that d6 pawn pretty quickly. He's in big trouble. But now look at what I did this time. He played rook f to d8. Knight takes d6 check, king f8. Now I took his other pawn. Knight takes c6. I'm sure you can see that white's position is completely winning. Rook d7. Now white to move. I have a pawn and 2 knights for a rook. If we add up numbers, like we're taught that a rook is worth 5 and a knight is worth 3 pawns, then I have the value of 7 pawns to 5. Obviously this is a big advantage, but we want to play the game correctly. Notice that my 2 knights are completely dominant. My d6 knight's defended by my bishop on g3. His rook on a8 can't move anywhere because my knights stop pretty much any possibility he has. I can increase in the center. I can play moves like d4, d5. His bishop on g7 is also completely passive, but knight being able to blockade on f5 or even having control of the f5 square locks that one down. He's in huge trouble. And at this point, I got back into the struggle. My last few moves were very good. I was back in the game. I realized I had to play chess again. Probably my best move now would have been simply d4. If he plays a5 defending his pawn, I can just play b3, stop any hope of counterplay for him on the queen side. My next couple moves can be rook e6, d5. Complete central lockdown, he's in huge trouble. I could have played that way. One of the interesting things about leaving the struggle, thinking about the win, is that you start to see ghosts. When you don't want to give your opponent any inkling of a chance, then sometimes you lose the objective sense that something that falls short really does fall short. And in this position, I'll be honest with you, I decided that I didn't want to allow him to have any queenside counterplay at all. And I started to have this idea that somehow he could play a5, a4, and get some attack. Well, of course, it's not true, because after a5, I can play b3, and he's completely locked down. There's nothing he can do. So that was why I made the decision to play knight takes b4. But that allows his rook into the game, which was not so good. If I had to do over again, I would have simply played d4, increased the bind on his center. But I was trying to stop everything because, again, I was thinking about the result. And what's interesting is that when you think about result, you tend to move back and forth between being overconfident and underconfident, and overconfident and underconfident, because you have this false vision of the fact that the win should be easy. And so whenever anything goes a little bit wrong, you start to get the sweats. You start to think, oh my God, it's gone totally wrong. And when things are going very well, you get overconfident and too relaxed. So you kind of get into this ricocheting back and forth against walls state of mind, which is very, very counterproductive. So if I had just had a calm, easy state, I would have simply seen, improve your position, no problem. I played knight takes b4. There was no reason to do that. He played f5. White to move. What do you do? Here's another moment where I completely lost my mind. You'll see that I have 2 pawns and 2 knights for a rook. It's the equivalent of being up a piece. I'm completely winning. I can take his f5 pawn if I want to later on. There's nothing he can do to defend it. All I have to do is play chess, ask myself the simplest question. What is his idea? What's his threat? Do you see his idea? This is actually one of the more hilarious moments in my chess career. When you play at a certain level, you don't expect yourself to make really, really obvious mistakes. But each player's strength is based upon them playing with a clear head, and here I wasn't. I saw that his basic idea was to play bishop takes b2, attacking my pawn. Materialism is the theme we're discussing. That relates to both being materialistic on the chessboard, playing moves like knight takes b4, which allow the opponent back in the game with either his rook or his bishop now. It relates to being worried about defending a pawn when we have many bigger things to worry about, like solidifying, stopping all of his moves like knight c6, and then playing rook f1 takes f5, and going after his king, finishing the game off. And it also relates to being materialistic by thinking about the result, like I've been discussing. I began the game with a very good decision, a sacrifice that I showed you. f5, temporarily giving up material to get a bind. On the theme of materialism, that was a good decision. Then everything fell apart. Here I defended his small threat and missed his biggest, rook e2. Black to move and win a piece. Do you see his idea? Of course, immediately after playing rook e2, I saw what I had missed. Take your time. Don't go on with the game until you see what I missed. It's pretty straightforward, right? Bishop d4 check. If I play bishop f2, of course, he can just trade bishops and take on d6. I've lost a piece. I have to move my king. And then black to move. Do you see what his idea was? And here he played the obvious fork, bishop c5. And there's nothing I can do. I lose a piece. It's also very valuable from a chess perspective to notice that knights that are diagonally apart from one another, separated by one square, it takes 4 moves for them to get to that square. For example, the knight from b4 to get to d6 would take, knight d5 to b6 to c4 to d6. 4 moves, so that's a very long way for a knight. Bishop c5, a simple fork, and I lose a piece. As you can imagine, I was completely incredulous. I went from being up a piece to not finding the easy solution to get out of his attacks and stay up the piece and he would have to resign. I was too impatient thinking about the party. Then I won a couple pawns. I started taking the result for granted again, and I missed this easy way for him to win a piece of mine. So now we're back in the thick of it. Suddenly I'm going to lose a piece, and I have to really outplay my opponent again to win the game. And fortunately, I was able to kick back into gear, and from this point on, I played very, very well. Let's look at how I finished the game. Knight takes f5, bishop takes b4. So now I have 3 pawns and a knight for a rook. So it's the equivalent of being up a pawn. It's like I made a very, very strong exchange sacrifice in this game. Of course, what happened, in fact, was just I made a lot of very, very bad moves when I was very close to the win. Learn this lesson from my mistakes. When you're close to the win, stay in the struggle. Make the best moves. That's what it means in chess to be winning. It means that if you make the best moves and I make the best moves, then my position will win. Being winning does not mean that if I play bad moves and you play good moves that I'll continue to win the game. Absolutely not. It means I'll usually lose the game from a winning position if I make bad moves. So your state of mind should reflect that reality. Now, of course, we're competitors. We're all playing chess to win at some level. So when we're playing the game and we're almost winning, sometimes we'll get excited. We're human beings. Our heart will start beating. We'll start thinking about after the game. But if you can, if possible, catch yourself. Don't beat yourself up over thinking that way, but just catch yourself and return to the moment. Return to the game and find the best moves. That's really what we're here to do, to try to consistently play the best moves. So I played d4. From here I started to lock down the position well. Rook e8. Bishop e5. Because his king is a little loose, I want to avoid trading off rooks and mount the pressure. Now my next step will be to expand on the king's side and make a pass pawn over there. He played king f7, rook f2. It's interesting, actually, I have good mating chances against his king. Notice that it was very, very important in this game that I was able to recover. The game was completely winning, then he had chances. Then it was completely winning again, then he had chances again. Now I was able to recover. Very often in these types of situations, when you've been so close to the win and you give it away, you're unable to regain your composure to get back into the struggle because you left the struggle. And it's actually very, very hard psychologically to regain the intensity that you once had. You'll notice that even in playing speed chess sessions sometimes, you'll be playing against somebody and you'll be winning and then you'll relax a little bit because it seems to be coming so easily. And suddenly they go on a streak, they start to win 4, 5, 6 games in a row and you simply can't get it back. For all competitors, so often you'll see tennis matches where somebody wins, 6-love and they're up 5-2 and then they suddenly lose the rest of that set and the next set and maybe the one after that because once you give up the zone, once you give up the tension of the struggle, it's very hard to get back. I was fortunate enough to do it in this game. After I played rook f2, I'm threatening all sorts of discoveries. Knight d6 check, knight g7 check to win his rook. Also, if he plays king g6, I can play knight h4 check. Push his king further up the board and I'll be able to force mate. So he played rook a8 to get out of any discoveries. After rook a8, I played g4. Notice that it might be very enticing to try to figure out some discovered attack to play with my knight. I can move my knight anywhere he has to move his king, but I have no way to win material, and a lot of the times in these types of positions, the potential of the tactic is much more valuable than the actual tactic itself. He can't do anything. He can't move his rook or his other rook or his bishop to a place anywhere near my knight, so I can just keep it that way. Expand on the king side with g4. King e6, h4, continue with my plan. Again, white's position objectively is winning because I've been able to solidify, and now I'm pressuring him back, but I have to play the best moves. Rook c8, h5, preparing a pass pawn on that side. King d5, I played g5. There's very little that black can do because my pieces are so centrally dominant. He played rook g8 now, stopping g6. I played bishop f6, defending the pawn. His king on d5 is interesting, well centralized, but also potentially quite vulnerable. Now he played king e4, getting aggressive with the king. Played king h3, slowly improving my game. He played king d3. So here I played knight h6, which is doing two things. First of all, it's attacking his rook and preparing to play g6 and push the pawn up. And also it's beginning a maneuver I had in mind, which is to bring my knight to the e5 square. Knight h6 to g4 to e5. He played rook e8, I played knight g4, threatening knight e5 check. He played rook c7, getting out of the way of it. Now I return to my old configuration by playing bishop e5. Now his rook is no longer defending g6. He played rook c8, knight f6. You can feel the gradual flow of this endgame. I'm winning by slowly pushing him back, improving my position. Black has to be careful to keep all the tactics in the air so he doesn't immediately lose. And I'm slowly but surely pushing him back, preparing to make the final advance on the king's side. Rook e7. Now I saw that I was objectively winning if I made the trade, so I did. Knight d5. Rook b7, simply knight takes b4, rook takes b4. At this point I had fully learned the lesson of relaxing when winning, so I calculated very closely. Played g6, h takes g6, h takes g6. He played rook b6, g7. My threat is rook f8. He played rook g8. Do you see how rook g8 defends against my idea? If I play rook f8 now, then after rook h6 check, king g3, he can play rook takes g7 check. And after bishop takes g7, rook g6 check, he can win the bishop. Still, of course, white is doing very well, up 2 pawns, but there's no reason for me to allow this. That would have been a terribly sad tactic to miss after all of these times of being winning and letting him back in, winning, letting him back in. If I'd let him back in that last time, I don't know if I could have dealt with it. So you can see from that last little tactic he had in mind, that even when we're so close to winning, just a few moves away from winning the game, if we make a bad move, if we think about the result, if we start to think about what's going to happen after the game, suddenly the whole position can turn around and we can find ourselves in a lot of trouble. I played rook f7, attacking his a7 pawn, preparing the final blow. a5, white's move, what do you do now? bring the final piece into the game. In the endgame, the king is very important. King h4. Point being now, if I play rook f8, his tactic wouldn't work, because after rook h6 check, king g5 attacks the rook. He played rook takes b2, and now after rook f8, he had to give up the rook, rook takes g7. Now, of course, it's completely winning for white. Bishop takes g7, rook takes a2, I played d5, he played king e4, d6, rook d2, I played rook e8 check, king f5, bishop f8. This position is very easily winning. I can always win as a5 pawn, use my bishop to defend my pawn and bring my king into the game and lock it down if I need to. He played a4, rook a8, rook d4 check, king g3. And after king e6, I played king f3 and he resigned. There's nothing he can do. My bishop is always very safe on f8 or e7. Giving my king into e3. He can't at once stop my d-pawn and defend his a-pawn. I'll win the a-pawn, push him back, and win the game very easily. So you see, this game could have been a tragedy, but it was actually a bit of a comedy. I let him in so many times, and you can learn a lot from this. I learned a lot from this struggle. I've seen players do this many times over all my years of chess competition, and I've done it myself a number of times. It's a very, very easy thing, the easiest thing to do, to relax when we're very close to winning, to start thinking about what we're about to do, because in life, when you're about to do something, you think about it. And so if you're on the edge of winning a championship and you start thinking about the celebration, or you're simply on the edge of winning a big game and you start thinking about the feeling afterwards, what you're going to do afterwards, you start thinking about a conversation that you might have with somebody, you start thinking about calling somebody, telling them about the game, all of those thoughts take you out of the struggle. And more than that, they take you away from the ability to deal with the subtle complexities of winning a technical chess game, of winning the final battle in the game, which is the movement from being better to being winning. And when somebody has a worse position, they're at their very, very most resourceful. It's like a fighter with his back against the wall. It's going to be the most desperate, very, very dangerous. So you have to be at least equally resilient, at least equally aware. Find all the best moves, and then you can really have that conversation, or go to that party.
Alrighty then. So there you have it. I think by now you understand what I mean by interactive and why it was difficult. So it was better that I just kept my mouth shut and let the thing play and clicked the play button every time it paused, giving you enough time to pause the video if you needed to. So I failed to mention that that was Materialism section. So there are three games in the Materialism section, and after that would be Downward Spiral. I'm going to read this to you because I don't know if you can see them unless you play this in HD, if you can get it in HD. I haven't seen these yet myself, so it'll be new to me too. So then there's Transitional Moments, there is The Illusion of Certainty, Poise Under Fire, and The Psychological Connection, Presence, and just a conclusion, a note from Josh. So there's quite a bit here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I lost count. Well, there's close to 20, not quite 20 videos here, and as you can see, this video took almost an hour. I don't know, I lost count. I didn't really calculate. I didn't really watch the clock, but it was almost an hour. So I mean, you can see why I hesitated to put these up. But my new subscriber Kyle really wanted to see these, so there you go. There you have them. I'm also going to do more puzzles and things like that. So the Chess Academy does continue. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I didn't bore you to death. And as always, keep on playing. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. You'll find some interesting things on my channel besides chess. But in any case, thank you for watching.